Hybrid warfare is upon us because Russian Shahed attack drones just penetrated deep into Polish territory, forcing NATO to scramble fighter jets in an attempt to shoot them down. What all this means, to put it into perspective, is this is the first time in history that NATO forces have directly engaged the Russian military, raising fears that the war could spill over. So is it finally time to sound the alarmist alarm, or is this all just one great big misunderstanding, guys?
Poland's prime minister said,
"This situation brings us closest we have ever been to open conflict since World War II, and that they're facing an enemy that doesn't hide its hostile intentions." Meanwhile, the Russian Defense Ministry hid their hostile intentions by denying any involvement, saying, quote, "No targets on the territory of Poland were planned for destruction."
Today, I want to know what's the evidence for whether or not this was really a deliberate drone attack. What was the Russian military's objectives here? How effective was NATO's response really? I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy. Let's find out.
But before we get into that, this episode is sponsored by Jocko Fuel, because all energy is not created equal, and how you choose to power yourself is important. I mean, it's 2025, you guys. I think we've evolved past trashy garbage gas station energy drinks at this point. I don't have time for drinks that spike me with energy, then crash me out. That's why I switched to Jocko Fuel, because Go is clean energy that's good for me. It's got 95 milligrams of caffeine, so it wakes me up for the day, while at the same time being balanced with L-theanine and a nootropic blend that keeps me focused but not cracked out. No sugar, no chemical aftertaste, just crisp, sustained energy that lets me push through long work days. And here's the thing, over 90% of energy drinks fail in their first year, because let's be honest, most of them suck and they don't do what they claim. But Jocko Fuel has been going strong for over 8 years now, because there are tons of people who actually find it valuable and enjoy it, like myself, and I see you guys in the comment section saying how much you love it too. And you can't fake that. So if you're building something, a body, a career, a family, or business, go to JockoFuel.com and use my code CAPPY25 for 25% off your first order of performance fuel. The link's in the description and pinned comment below. Back to the episode.
What happened is 19 Russian drones entered Polish airspace from 11:30 p.m. on Tuesday night until 6:30 a.m. Wednesday, September 10th. Violating airspace is considered a big party foul in this region, so NATO scrambled assets from multiple different countries, including Polish F-16 fighters, Dutch F-35 stealth fighters, and German Patriot air defense batteries to intercept these drones. All these different countries' weaponry was coordinated with an Italian airborne warning surveillance aircraft, which identified the location of these enemy targets, fed it to the fighter jets real time, who then shot down at least 4 of them. What we know is Russia launched over 400 attack drones and some 40 missiles into western Ukraine on that night. And the reason NATO officials think this isn't true, that it's just an accident, is because of how many and how deep they penetrated into Polish territory. Look at the live conflict map behind me. It's never a good day when I say that. The map shows us the marked geolocations where Russian drone pieces were recovered. Where were these drones headed? The answer to that is being used as the single biggest piece of evidence that this was an intentional Russian drone incursion, because one senior military official said that these drones had the flight path on their way towards the city of Rzeszów, inside of Poland. Rzeszów is in eastern Poland, less than 100 kilometers from Ukraine's border. It just so happens to be a key logistics hub for NATO weapons being sent into Ukraine. In fact, 80% of all foreign aid and weaponry transits through Poland. There are warehouses here to store the munitions. Could it be a coincidence that these drones were headed there? Who knows? Only the military gods, right? Russia's Shahed drones could destroy these shipments when they're at their most vulnerable, all tied up and locked down in the shipment.
Robert Kagan, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, said, quote, "The only surprising thing about the attack on Poland is that it didn't happen sooner. Since before World War I, it was understood that if one nation's government provided weapons and war material directly to another nation at war with a third nation, that legally made the donor a belligerent in the war and therefore subject to attack. When intercepting drones, these aircraft have to stay on station for hours at a time, so Polish citizens uploaded footage throughout the night, hearing different NATO fighter aircraft circling overhead. In fact, Polish authorities had to send out an alert to some 9 million residents in the eastern part of the country, telling them to shelter in place during the attack.
But it's not just about the cost of weapons, really. You gotta consider the cost of scrambling jets. It's enormous. Take a look at these numbers that are publicly released by the Pentagon for the costs. It's millions of dollars each time these jets have to be on station overnight, not to mention the maintenance, wear and tear on all the airframes. Usually air-to-air missiles from fighter jets cost millions of dollars. The military powers of NATO would not be able to routinely use F-35s to intercept these cheap drones each and every night. I remember when I was younger and totally broke, I took my wife out on our first date night. Spent a bunch of money, but after that we started dating regularly and I realized I couldn't sustain that. What I'm saying is using F-35s is a steak dinner. You can't do it every night. But very recently, NATO allies have developed a new capability exactly meant for this kind of occasion. They likely launched their new Advanced Precision Kill Weapon System. These are relatively cheap, they're like $15,000 rockets that destroy attack drones at a fraction of the cost of other air-to-air missiles. So the F-15, for instance, is capable of carrying 42 of these 70mm rockets to hit multiple drones, far more than the like 8 regular air-to-air missiles that you might see on there. Those drones only cost about $40,000 for Russia to produce, and they're capable of carrying a hefty payload of like 40 kilograms, 90 pounds, which is basically around the explosive punch of like an artillery shell. It can level a building. 4 out of 9 drones intercepted doesn't sound like an outstanding interception rate, but this is for a number of reasons. Shooting anything down mid-air with a multi-million-dollar munition from a warplane can cause tremendous risk to the people underneath. It's a real hazard. No one wants fragments from these landing on their Volkswagen. It can be more safe to let the drone crash, especially if it's unclear if it's armed, has a payload or not, and it sounds like these drones were unarmed, and we'll get more into that in a second. So Polish officials said that only the drones that posed a real threat were ones that were chosen to be shot down. Military analysts all across the board, though, are pretty unanimously warning that NATO's response has exposed a weakness to Russia when it comes to this type of warfare. NATO does not currently seem to have the cost-effective mobile and defense teams with 50 cal machine gun trucks. They don't deploy helicopters or UAV interceptor teams for this kind of purpose. The best option currently that they seem to have is expensive stealth fighter jets. Conrad, the director of Roshan Consulting, is a defense analyst that's an expert on Russia and Belarus. His analysis was that claims that some drones were deliberately allowed through because they pose no threat should be regarded as a dangerous illusion. Evidence that the drone attack caught authorities by surprise is the fact that some of the wreckage was found as far as 550 kilometers or 340 miles deep into Polish territory. This suggests that many of these drones could have been intercepted much sooner, so extensive safety precautions were obviously taken. Poland went as far as to shut down major airports, including Warsaw. What is Russia's goal here? It would be to influence public opinion to not support the war in Ukraine. Poland has sent some $4 billion to support it so far. It'd be an attempt to deter Poland from increasing support for Ukraine. Robert Kagan said, quote, "Aiding Ukraine has already begun to be a controversial subject in Poland. The prospect of Russian attacks and retaliation could drive up opposition, especially if the United States proves unreliable," end quote. It can also be aimed at creating what is essentially drama between the NATO ally, because it could force there to be disagreements over the best way to respond. That causes stress, because already the incursions have caused a wide variety of opinions on how serious the response should be. It's ranged from US Congressman Joe Wilson saying, quote, "This is an act of war." And meanwhile, the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom had some more tame words saying, quote, "It's extremely reckless move, which only serves to remind us of President Putin's blatant disregard for peace." The US response so far has been less alarm compared to the NATO members, with the president saying, quote, "It could have been a mistake," end quote. It's important to note that there's some 10,000 US troops stationed in Poland who are at risk to these type of attacks. Some of the evidence that suggests this was not simply a misunderstanding is the fact that the majority of these drones came in from Belarus. They appear to have come from the increased presence of Russian forces happen to already be in Belarus right now, because this all happens to coincide with the large-scale Zapad 25 military exercises. This, of course, wouldn't be the first time that Russian troops had used military training drills as a cover for an attack. However, it's also true that Russian drones crash landing all over the region is not that unusual. Russian drones have even crossed into Poland as early as last week. Over the past year, there's been multiple reports of a single drone or two landing in Romania, Moldova, or the Baltic states. I see these kind of reports are up all the time. Lithuania has caught Russian drones crashing on their territory, which also prompted scrambling of NATO jets just earlier this year. You might recall earlier in the invasion of Ukraine back in November of 2022, a missile landed in Poland, killing 2 people near the border. Originally, it was believed to be a Russian missile, but a full investigation by Polish authorities later revealed that it was an air defense missile that had misfired from Ukraine. So, armed Russian attack drones have landed inside of Latvia. There are dozens, literally dozens, of these reports over the past few years. In these instances, each country kind of did a hand wave and said, yeah, you know what? Mistakes happen, and they didn't use it as a reason to have a full-on freak out over it. So why is it different this time? What's different now than all those other occasions? A security official from Belarus said it was because the drones had been jammed that they went into Poland in the first place. Russia's senior diplomat in Poland, named Ordash, said, quote, "We consider the accusations groundless. No evidence that these drones are of Russian origin has been presented." I guess implying that these are Ukrainian drones. Russia's absolutely not interested in an escalation with Poland, he goes on to say, but unfortunately there is no reason to expect that the Polish authorities in their anti-Russian frenzy will listen to us either.
U.S. General Alexis Grinkowicz, who's NATO's supreme allied commander in Europe, said, "We do not yet know if this was an intentional act or an unintentional act."
It's possible that Ukrainian countermeasures could divert attack drones, it's true. I remember when I was reporting from the inside of Ukraine, the front line, my phone would get spoofed and my phone would suddenly show my location on a map, on Google Maps for instance, as somewhere 300 miles to the east or west. Sometimes my phone GPS would say that I was in Poland, sometimes it would say I was in Russia. The point is, when you spoof a drone, it could send it far off course, making the drone think that it was somewhere else altogether. Jamming can send drones many miles off course because they navigate using these automated systems. Ivan isn't sitting behind a computer flying each and every 400 of these drones for 16 hours straight to reach their targets. That's all automated using satellites.
But Poland and many other nations are saying that this was deliberate because the way Russian drones react to electronic warfare is supposedly one of 2 ways. They either fly straight back towards the point of origin, or the second way is that they go off course and crash, but what they don't do is they don't fly on a deliberate path to key military targets in Poland randomly. Because one of the drones even landed at a military base according to initial reports.
It's not surprising at all that Russia would deny their involvement, right? That's kind of par of the course, we would expect that. What is surprising, I think, to me, is how NATO didn't downplay it this time as just an accident like all the other times in the past. It's like that friend that you keep making an excuse for and you're like, nah, he's cool like all the time, I swear, he's never like this. Calling it out as a Russian deliberate attack publicly risks further escalation, which to me, that's something to note. But here's the thing, guys. Russia's launched many similar sized attacks over the past few months, and this never happened before those times. We also know that Russian intelligence agencies like the FSB, GUR have been confirmed to be running covert actions inside Poland since 2023. Russia's recruited people in Poland that are desperate for money and tasked them with scouting seaports, hiding tracking devices and military cargo, and even plotting to derail trains that are carrying weapons to Ukraine. Russian sabotage campaigns have been linked to warehouses fires all the way in Britain, an attack against a dam in Norway, and multiple cables cut under the Baltic Sea. It doesn't take a military genius mastermind to recognize that a drone attack on Rzeszów would be a major goal, or even forcing more security in this region slows down shipments of this military aid and makes them move under the cover of night only. I was surprised to recently learn that Russia's been flying surveillance drones over logistics routes that the United States uses to ship this military aid through eastern Germany. So Russia's operating drones already in Germany, way further west than Poland. They're collecting intelligence with these drones that may be used for future sabotage efforts. It also gives them advance notice of when different types of weapon systems are arriving at the front line in Ukraine. The thing is, this is exactly the kind of plausible deniable operation that characterizes gray zone hybrid warfare operations, because right now it's difficult to prove one way or the other really. This can be done incrementally, each time testing the limits without outright triggering a case of full-blown war. I mean, it's a tough call. Do we respond with missiles or strongly worded letters? That's the big strategic dilemma of hybrid warfare. Personally, I don't think that's actually what really happened here, because in the past, when these kind of drones would crash in other nations, sometimes they often would be armed, which is how they normally would be, and that would suggest that it was an accident. But since they're all unarmed in this case, it seems like so far this appears to have been a dry run test of the NATO alliance to see how the members respond to being poked and prodded like this. But I of course can't be 100% certain. That's the whole point in hybrid warfare though. It leaves that little bit of room for doubt. That voice in the back of your head that always tells you, you're making a mistake, you're wrong. That's the voice that makes taking any kind of decisive unified action in hybrid warfare so difficult. All of this comes just 1 month after the US generals released plans for the NATO Eastern Flank Defense Plan, which is designed to prevent this kind of hybrid war attack from ever happening. On the diplomatic level, the drone incursion caused Poland's government to invoke Article 4 of the NATO treaty. What's Article 4? I love bureaucracy as much as the next person, and this is, my friends, a bureaucratic mechanism. It doesn't force members to take any action, but it could pave the way for a joint response. This has been invoked 8 times only since the alliance was founded, so it's kind of Article 5 light. What this raises is a bunch of uncomfortable questions now about how to respond to what are being called below the threshold attacks. Below the threshold means anything short of launching a missile at a country and saying, yeah, I did it, what are you gonna do about it? If you're interested in learning about missiles in warfare and how the line between drones and missiles is being blurred, check out the video here that we recently made on it. I'm very proud of it. I'm your average infantryman, Chris Cappy, ending transmission.